Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are based. A very, very warm welcome from our studio here in Hamburg. My name is Anne Moschner. I am the Communications and Marketing Director of DNV Maritime. It is my great pleasure indeed to be your host for these coming few hours at DNV's Maritime Energy Transition Summit 2024. And we're here gathered together with all of you. More than 10,000 have signed up for today's event, and together we try to tackle and address some of the most critical challenges facing the maritime industry as we navigate towards a more sustainable energy future. And what does that mean? Of course, we will talk about decarbonisation, we will talk about technological innovations, we will also talk about regulatory changes and challenges. And together with industry leaders and innovators from across the value chain of shipping, we are going to explore clean energy technologies, decarbonisation strategies, and we also want to at least briefly touch upon the transformative power of digitalisation in all of this. So we hold a lot in store for you, and my recommendation to all of you is to, well, sit back, listen in, learn, and then hopefully take the insights of today into your organizations to take better informed decisions, and then hopefully this will help all of us advance on this important journey towards a greener maritime future. Thank you very much for being with us today, and thank you for being with us on this important journey. Now, let me very briefly run you through a few highlights from the agenda. So in a moment, we're going to kick it off with a keynote from DNV Maritime's CEO, Knut Øberg-Nielsen. And then we want to dive a little bit into what's driving decarbonisation. And we will start with the market drivers, and we will get to hear it from a cargo owner, because cargo owners have actually emerged as a driving force in maritime decarbonisation. We will not get away without talking about regulations, so that's certainly an important slot as well. We will try to outline the trajectory the industry is likely to take, and then we want to put it all into perspective and discuss with some of our partners and customers what are the implications then for the industry, not least the commercial implications. We will also talk about strategies and technologies, so it's not just about addressing the challenges, it's also about finding possible solutions, and energy efficiency there will be key. We will come back to that later on, but also we need to measure the impact of energy efficiency, so another discussion to look forward to. And finally, and very, very importantly, it's also going to be about the human element, because after all, seafarers will be critical in supporting the transition on board the vessel. So we will come back to the role of seafarers in decarbonisation as well. And then finally, and that's new, ladies and gentlemen, for the first time ever, we're not just going to have a show here on the main virtual stage, but you actually get to choose breakout session following the main program for very interesting topics that we've got lined up for you. And there you can learn more about specific services and solutions developed by DNV experts that will help you in your organization solve your decarbonisation challenges. And more about the topics and how it all works a little later on. I mentioned many DNV experts, but it's not just us here presenting to you. We actually have invited quite a few business partners and stakeholders from the maritime industry who will contribute to today's agenda. And let me just very quickly say thank you to all the contributing organizations, starting with Total Energies, Altera Infrastructure, Berger Bulk, Njord Solutions, Woodside Energy, Copenhagen Commercial Platform, and the Mission to Seafarers. All will contribute and feature on stage and join in to the discussions. Thank you very much to all of you. I think it's a very impressive lineup, so there's no more time to waste. But I have two more practical comments to quickly make before we get started. One is that, as I said, there will be breakout sessions later on for you to engage and also ask your questions. But of course, we encourage you to also, well, just share your thoughts and reflections by actively participating in the chat. There is a chat box right next to the streaming window where you can do that. And because I know the question is going to come anyway, yes, there will be a recording made available very shortly following this event. And that's it for the practicalities, ladies and gentlemen. Now I think it's time to officially get started. I'm now very happy to hand over for some opening remarks to the CEO of DNV Maritime, Knut Øberg Nielsen.
Thank you very much, Anna. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and good afternoon. A very warm welcome to our Maritime Energy Transition Summit. Thank you all so much for joining us today. It is fantastic to have such broad participation as we welcome thousands of listeners from locations around the world. How to navigate and accelerate the maritime energy transition is currently top of mind for most of the industry. And the topics that we will be discussing today, alternative fuels and energy efficiency measures, are extremely important in this context. We do hope that, as much as anything else, today's conference can serve as a catalyst for constructive dialogue, knowledge sharing, and action going forward. Because one thing seems very clear: the clock is ticking. We need to start making real headway now. As we all know by now, global decarbonization targets became more ambitious last summer, following the IMO's MEPC 80 committee session. Shipping's target is now 20% reduction in emissions by 2030, 70% reduction by 2040, and full decarbonization by or around 2050. We have also seen the implementation of the EU's emissions trading scheme on shipping from 1st of January this year, further raising the stakes. Now, the drive for decarbonization is not just coming from regulations. More and more, we are seeing demands for a greener maritime industry from stakeholders throughout the value chain. As we will see today, cargo owners are a key force in this regard. They are listening to their customers and to society at large, and understand their responsibilities and obligations to make their supply chains greener. And in turn, they expect their maritime partners to help them achieve this. This increased pressure really crystallizes things and challenges us to come up with both short-term and long-term decarbonization solutions. This begins with an analysis of fuel availability. In doing this, we cannot ignore the reality that the supply of alternative carbon-neutral fuels is nowhere near where it needs to be to reach short-term emission reduction targets. Our latest maritime forecast estimates that shipping would need 30 to 40% of the global supply of carbon-neutral fuels if we are to reach over IMO's 2030 targets. Now, that is, as most of us can understand, highly unlikely. Bordering, I would say, on the impossible. Yes, we do see promising growth in the number of new build and retrofitted vessels which will be able to run on alternative fuels, whether it's methanol, ammonia, or something else. Interest in biofuels is also increasing, and this could be a key component for the decarbonization of the existing fleet. This is a great step in the right direction, and we expect these numbers to continue to grow. However, the reality is that even if the technology is in place, we are still a long way from having the volume of carbon-neutral fuel needed to run these vessels. We also must accept that these new fuels come at a premium compared to traditional fuels, at least for now. It is also uncertain which fuels will eventually be the ones which break through and succeed, making investment decisions even more difficult for ship owners. So how can we reduce emissions by 20% by 2030 if we know that we haven't got enough alternative fuels? Now, this is a key question. And the answer is we need to look beyond fuels and this starts with energy efficiency. A range of innovative, practical, and effective technologies is available today, which can increase the energy efficiency of vessels, decrease net energy input, and achieve significant reductions in emissions. We will hear later in detail about wind-assisted propulsion systems, and these have captured the imagination of many within the maritime industry and beyond, probably due to the fact that they bring us all the way back to our maritime roots. Who would have thought that after all these years of technological developments, we would be sailing again? Now, this is an exciting practical solution to the decarbonisation puzzle and a testament to the fantastic innovation taking place throughout the maritime industry. There are other energy-saving options in abundance: air lubrication systems, solid oxide fuel cells, machine efficiency improvements, waste heat recovery, and many, many more. Now, digitalization is also playing its part, making fleets smarter and maximizing efficiencies. Ship owners need to make thorough examinations of these technologies and decide what the best fit is for their own fleet. Once this is done, they should make short, mid, and long-term decarbonization plans, which have energy efficiency at the core. Because, as we all know, there is no time to lose. I hope that when you watch today's exchange, you are excited by the incredible levels of technological innovation which are taking place across the maritime industry and emboldened by the challenge that lies ahead. We are in the middle of a decisive decade for shipping and what I like to call a true maritime renaissance. The actions that we take now can both deliver short-term results and ripple throughout the rest of the 21st century. We can use the tools at our disposal to reduce emissions today while also continuing to plan for alternative fuels, laying the foundations for even greater things in 2040 or 2050 and beyond. Finally, I would like to wrap up by mentioning a topic particularly close to my heart. About 1.5 million crew men and women face dangers every day to keep the maritime industry moving and to keep the global economy afloat. With rapid technological change taking place, it remains vital for us to remember that the safety of our seafarers should always lie at the heart of decarbonization. And for today's event, we are partnering with Mission to Seafarers, a fantastic organization which provides these men and women with help and support that can make all the difference to their everyday lives. I'm sure you agree that this is more than a worthy cause and that you will mark your attendance at today's event by making a small donation to Mission to Seafarers. And with that, I thank you very much for your time. I hope you take as much from today's conference as my colleagues here at DNV have put into it. And I would now like to turn you all back to our very capable moderator, Anna. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Knut, for your kind words. But also, I would like to just stress the important point made there towards the end, how important it is to put seafarers at the heart of the transition. Ladies and gentlemen, let me explain a little bit more about the support that we as DNV have given to the mission to seafarer over recent years, because it's truly important to us as an organization. For example, we have in the past supported the development of the Happy at Sea app that was launched during North Shipping last year, and we continue our support with supporting the Mission to Seafarers Flying Angel campaign, which is really designed to enhance the welfare of seafarers. It's about seafarer centres, about welfare and justice. It's also about raising awareness for seafarers and much, much more. And I mean, putting seafarers at the heart of the transition, putting safety and quality first, and really ensure that it all happens with the seafarers in mind is truly important to us as an organization. And that's why we, as Knut just mentioned, are encouraging all of you to also make a small contribution. As I said before, more than 10,000 have registered today, and imagine all of you just made a small contribution. This would make such a big impact. And here comes our DNV promise of the day. If you use the QR code, the link that you can see on the screen now, to submit your donation, DNV is going to match the amount. So hopefully we can create a bit of an impact there together. And thank you to all of you already now for showing your support. Now, coming back to something else that Knut said. Knut said the clock is ticking, and this is really the decisive decade for shipping. And he is absolutely right. The pressure is on, and not just because of, let's say, the regulatory developments. And I mean, they obviously play a very, very important role, and we will come back to that a little later in the agenda. But Knut also mentioned something very important there, that, it's really an increased pressure and demand from across the entire value chain of shipping, and their cargo owners have emerged as a driving force. I said it in my intro earlier today, and that's why we would now like to hear it from a cargo owner. We want to understand a little bit what's driving them and how are they approaching decarbonization in shipping. And I'm very happy that I have a colleague by my side to help us understand this a little bit more. A warm welcome to our studios, Jason Stephanatos.
Thank you, Anne. It's a very great pleasure to be here.
Very, very happy to have you. Ladies and gentlemen, Jason is DNV Maritime's Global Decarbonization Director. And naturally in that role, Jason, you have both ears on the ground of the market 24/7. And of course, you also very regularly engage in discussions with cargo owners about their decarbonization ambitions and strategies. So I'll leave the floor to you.
Thank
Please.
you very much, Anne. So as Knut and Anne mentioned, the drive for decarbonization is not just coming from the regulatory side. More and more we are seeing demands for a greener shipping industry from stakeholders across the entire value chain. And we believe this to be essential for decarbonization to be a sustainable endeavor. And while the regulatory drivers are important, and along with international governance, they set the path and the minimum requirements for decarbonizing the industry, a transition, and especially an accelerated transition, needs to also be commercially attractive in order to make some impact. And to facilitate a commercially attractive transition, it is imperative to establish a level playing field and to ensure that we have enough incentives to invest towards the transition. And as mentioned before, but cannot be emphasized enough, decarbonization requires a paradigm shift towards working together, from ship managers and ship owners up all the way to charterers and cargo owners. Only by aligning the market dynamics and improving and optimizing the performance of the fleet and distributing the cost along the value chain, which of course requires all the stakeholders to be on board, only then can we overcome the barriers and actually have some significant impact and progress towards achieving our goals. And having said that, I'm very happy to now welcome Sebastian Ross, General Manager, Shipping Performance and Innovation from TotalEnergies Trading and Shipping, with substantial experience from the chartering and the shipping operations from the cargo owner side. And in the next few minutes, we will have the chance to hear from Sebastian how TotalEnergies are viewing their role in this decarbonization journey. So Sebastian, a very big welcome to our Maritime Energy Transition Summit. And we are very glad to have you here as our first external speaker.
Thank you very much, Jason.
So, starting right away, TotalEnergies' climate ambition is net zero emissions by 2050 together with society. This is quite a strong and inspiring ambition. And just to ask quite simply, why do cargo owners care? What is the drive for TotalEnergies to decarbonize their operations?
It's a very good question, Jason. So where do we come from? In a nutshell, TotalEnergies has the ambition to be a major player in the energy transition and to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 together with society. In order to do so, we have committed, to profoundly transform our production and sales while continuing to meet the energy needs of a growing population. And we have placed, sustainable development at the heart of our strategy, our projects, and our operation. So moving on to our trading and shipping activities, at TotalEnergies, we aim at being a responsible and leading oil and trading shipping company operating in a transitioning energy market. One of the pillars into this ambition is to decarbonize our operation and to use the most efficient low carbon solutions for shipping. So this is it in a nutshell about your question, which is the why.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was really interesting to hear the terms also you used about having the decarbonization and sustainability in the heart of the organization. So going away from the strategic part, going into more practical things, you work in the shipping arm of TotalEnergies, and it would be really interesting for us to hear from you. What have you been doing so far as TotalEnergies, and what do you plan to do in the short term? I mean, what is your focus in practical terms for the short-term future?
Okay. Our focus today is to optimize and take the best out of the existing ships and existing available technologies, while obviously preparing the fleet for the future. So what does that mean in practice? What do we do every day in practice? We work at TotalEnergies Trading and Shipping simultaneously on 3 levels. The first one is the optimization of our operation and the voyage execution. The second one is working on the energy efficiency technologies and ship design, more broadly. And the third one is working on alternative fuels. So without going too much in technical details, I can provide you with a few examples of concrete actions for each of them. So first one, I mentioned our operation. Here we see a significant fuel savings potential with low hanging fruits, low capex. And the idea again is really to optimize and take the best out of the existing fleet that we have in the water today. To do so, we rely a lot on digital tools. There are plenty of tools available today on the market, tons of data, but we feel that unfortunately this data is still very underused by our industry. For example, what we do at TotalEnergies Trading and Shipping, and this is with minimum investment, we manage to achieve an efficient performance monitoring for our TC fleet. And a second example is the use of weather routing services to optimize the voyage and optimize the route in order to shave off a few percentage of fuel consumption and CO2 emissions. So first pillar, operations. The second pillar, I mentioned energy efficiency technologies and ship design. Again, here, plenty of low-hanging fruits with limited capex, short payback. I have in mind the usual suspects like the PBCF, low friction paints, VFD on heavy electrical consumers, for which we have many years of experience on board the ship that we charter, and it proved to work. We also went one step further in the energy efficiency because we have implemented more expensive technologies, case by case, depending on the ship type, like battery hybrid systems, air lubrication systems. So you see, we are going one step further. And finally, in this field, we are running a rotor sail retrofit project on board one MR tanker to test the relevance of such technology for our business. So in the end, on the ship design and technology, lots of possibilities with various uses, various financial commitment levels, low-hanging fruits towards bigger and more expensive system. But I'd like to stress out that all of them are showing shorter and shorter payback with the emerging regulation and carbon tax like we see already in Europe. And once we have optimized our operation, we have optimized the ship that we use, the third pillar is to work on the fuel. So we have saved as much as we can the energy demand, and now we also look at transitioning to new fuels, less carbon intensive. Today, we clearly see LNG as a transitioning fuel, and the best mature technology available in operation with an available bunkering networks in the main hubs. At Total Energies Trading and Shipping, we started several years ago with this technology. We charter today 11 LNG dual fuel oil tankers, and this believes a fuel of choice for new orders even today. It is not perfect though, and I have in mind the methane slip issue, but the industry is committed to work on it. Significant technological improvement were already achieved and will further come in the future. We are part of some initiatives on that. Still on the alternative fuels, I mentioned LNG, but I also said earlier that we are preparing the fleet for the future. And more recently, we decided to diversify our portfolio of alternative fuel, and we confirmed several commitments for methanol dual fuel tankers, new building projects in various smaller size segments, and those ships are supposed to hit the water in the coming years, starting next year and onwards. To finish on the fuel, I'd like to mention the biofuels, which is another solution which is technically viable, which is commercially available today. And for this one, as the trading and shipping branch of Total Energies, we work closely with our affiliate, Total Energies Marine Fuel, which has developed an up and running marine biofuel supply chain. Again, like LNG, nothing is perfect, and biofuel, one of the pain points is the limited availability for the shipping. And I would like also to mention that our industry must be very cautious on the feedstock's origin and traceability of the biofuel. These are the three pillars, and as a result, just to illustrate with concrete figures, our recent LNG fuel VLCC oil tanker in our TC fleet, they see their annual greenhouse gases emission cut by 50%, so half of what it used to be in 2008. And the figure is roughly the same, half for the LNG carriers. So this is the result of the three actions that I just mentioned. It was a long answer to a short question, Jason, but I tried to be quite illustrative.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it was quite extensive, and it's really impressive to see that you cover everything. And I think that's why you're put in the forefront as well. Many things I would like to cover for the selection of the new buildings fuels. The EUAs, I will park those thoughts just to go on the collaboration part, because we have said many times that we need many stakeholders to work together. And of course, everything you described, it's initiatives you take from your side, but you also cooperate with ship owners to actually implement them. And simply put, what do you expect from ship owners for the existing fleet? And of course, I would expect to have some differentiation between time charter fleet and the spot market.
Thank you, Jason. Indeed, collaboration is key in this maritime journey, and we won't be able to do anything in isolation. This is crystal clear. All the initiatives that I just mentioned can only materialize when we partner with the right and like-minded stakeholders across the full value chain. If we take the example of the LNG dual fuel ship, first you need a first-class shipyard, equipment manufacturer, class society to build the ship. Then you need to partner with the right ship owner who believes in the technology, who is ready to commit, invest long-term money into this asset, to invest also, and this is very important, into the training of the crew, because all those technologies, this is something new for the seafarers. They need to be trained, they need to stay safe. So this is a real key element. And again, it needs investment. And in the end, this was the LNG fuel example, but this is valid for any new fuel, any energy efficiency equipment. So the entire value chain is important. So what is our role as a charterer into this landscape? Well, we use our strong balance sheet and creditworthiness to commit long-term on innovative projects, and that allows to enable those projects to materialize. And here there is a big difference, back to the second part of your question, between time charter and spot charter contract. For time charter, we have a much bigger lever because we are also in charge of bunkering the ship. So we also bear the risk of sourcing and supply, which is very relevant in the case of alternative fuel. Being a large company like Total Energies, with large footprint across the world, being also a fuel producer, fuel provider, this gives us an additional leverage to drive and support the decarbonization. One final role I'd like to mention as a charterer, we also aim at facilitating test trials for new technologies on board our time chartered fleet. That's another difference between the two types of contract. For example, we carried out biofuel tests. We host a carbon capture pilot project on one of our LNG carriers. So we really look seriously into opportunities to invest and support technically, financially, the development of decarbonization technologies.
Yeah, that was quite insightful, especially for our attendees from ship-owning companies. And we covered a lot about the technical measures, but you also mentioned some operational measures, which of course can offer low-hanging fruits, but at the same time, we have the challenge that more stakeholders are involved. Would you like to share with us how you handle that?
It's a big challenge. You're right. I already spoke about the operation extensively, but maybe I would like to focus here answering your question on one aspect, which is the data transmission and availability between multiple parties. It could be equipment manufacturer, ship owner, class, charterer. Our industry needs data transparency between parties. This is key, in order to gain mutual knowledge and awareness on the actual behavior of the ships in the real life. This is also why Total Energies, this transparency, this is why we are a signatory and a founding member of the Sea Cargo Charter Initiative in order to encourage and promote this transparency and the shipping decarbonization in general.
Okay, it's very positive to see that you focus on things you can control as well, not just throwing the responsibility to others. That's very positive, and I think the attitude we need. So coming back to what you mentioned about the EUAs and the ETS, it's been almost more than a month now that we have a change in the industry. We have the first CO2 tax, large-scale CO2 tax, for vessels calling EU ports. They are subject to EU ETS. So from our third-party role, we see that all the stakeholders are still in uncharted waters. They try to see how to work and how to set their systematics. And we would like to hear from you, how do you manage? And to take a more general view, do you feel that monetary incentive schemes can really drive the decarbonization for the shipping industry?
Okay. I will start with the ETS, was the first part of your question. So on ETS, Total Energies, we had a comfortable position, so to say, because this is not something new. We know the system for many years, since we operate a lot of land-based assets in Europe, our refineries, for instance. So for us, it was just about adapting this to the shipping. Even though we are not ship owner, obviously we see this ETS cost being passed on to the charterer. It was also the philosophy of the regulation. So for us, it was a matter of incorporating this new tax into the broader trading value chain and to manage our exposition. So we have, in order to do so, we have developed and implemented the right tool. And so far, I have to say it has been a smooth implementation on the ETS side for us. Second part of your question, more generally about monetary incentives. Of course, we believe these are good drivers and powerful instruments for decarbonizing. All the new technologies, new alternative fuels that we hear about every day, there are a lot of them for the decarbonization. They are all more expensive than the current fossil fuel. This is a fact. So without a sustainable and economically viable business case, most of the initiatives will remain voluntary actions and they will stay very limited. So what our industry needs is an international playing field without loopholes, with the right carbon price, maybe in combination with fuel standard measures. I have in mind the Fuel EU Maritime or the GFS under development at IMO. And this is paramount because we need that for large deployment and uptake of the decarbonisation solutions.
That's very interesting to hear. And with this, I think we have reached the end of our time slot. So once again, I would like to thank you very much, Sebastian, for joining us, and wish you a nice day ahead.
Thank you very much, Jason. Time flies. We could speak much more, but
yeah, that's true.
But the rest of the program is very nice, and I will stay tuned. Thank you very much.
Please, and we continue. So with that, I give it back to you, Anne.
Thank you very much indeed, Jason, and also thanks to Sebastian from my side. I think that was a very, very interesting discussion. And before you get to leave the stage, maybe a quick attempt at summarizing your key takeaways.
That was a lot, but I would say I was impressed by the fact that TotalEnergies goes through the whole spectrum, and I think this matches with our key messages that we need to turn every stone to investigate everything before we dismiss it. And the second part that I keep is the need for transparency. We have all the stakeholders becoming industry, so we need to make sure that all exchange the information in the most efficient way.
Thank you for that, Jason. And maybe to stay or dwell a little bit on what we just learned, I think it was really interesting what Sebastian just said also about how important it is for the industry to create a level playing field. And I believe that maybe their regulations, generally speaking, still have a very, very important role to play to drive change, to drive innovation across the industry. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, of course, the regulatory framework is what sets the pace and also the level playing field. We see commercial requirements being faster sometimes, but at the end, if we take the EU ETS, for example, or the Fuel EU coming, or the GFI, we see that the inclusion of shipping in EU ETS increased significantly the awareness in the industry. People not caring about decarbonization now actively work on that, and I think this is definitely what sets the pace of the industry.
Thank you so much for that, Jason. And since it's so important to understand the regulatory landscape, and EU ETS is only the latest edition, the latest change, there's so much more in the pipeline. I think it's really important to be able to now give you an overview of what's happening and shed some light what's on the regulatory agenda. And for that, I'm now super happy to hand over to my colleague, Eirik Nyhus, who is our Director Environment and also a renowned podcast host. He's the podcast host of our Maritime Impact podcast. So if you haven't listened to him before, now is your chance. A warm welcome, Eirik Nyhus.
Well, thank you very much for that kind introduction, Anne. Much appreciated. What I'm here to do today is essentially to help in setting the scene a bit by talking about what's happening in the regulatory space and how that is driving change and innovation in the industry. This is really based on what goes on in multiple regulatory arenas that we have around the world. And I'll be diving a little bit into each of those. We won't go too deep because that would really take the whole of the conference, and I have no intent of doing that. But a few minutes dive into the key milestones, what we expect to see happening over the next few years, will be very useful in setting the stage here. So to start at the top, what we have to understand is that one of the most important key drivers in the regulatory space is, of course, the IMO, the International Maritime Organization, that UN body that sits in London, where I, with hundreds of others, attend and try to deal with environmental regulatory issues. What happened last year in the middle of 2023 there was that the IMO adopted a revised greenhouse gas strategy. This has some very significant implications. First and foremost, I want to emphasize that this strategy was adopted unanimously. Everybody was on board with it. There were no reservations, which is very important from the political point of view. But when it comes to the content, we are looking at something that is significantly more impactful than what we had back in 2018 when the initial strategy was adopted. Because what the shipping community has now agreed on, regulators with industry piling on, is that shipping should decarbonize by 2050. Not only decarbonize, but decarbonize in a well-to-wake perspective. What this means is that you're no longer only looking at what happens to fuels when they're burned, what kind of emissions you get, you're also looking at the actual footprint of what happens when fuels are produced. So that, in a sense, expands the scope of what we're looking at when regulations are being designed. So full decarb by 2050 in a well-to-wake perspective. That's the key headline of what the IMO agreed. Now, we all know that if you only have an ultimate goal and it's far out there, things might not happen too quickly and before you get into full panic mode as the deadline approaches. So what the IMO also did was to establish 2 milestones, one in 2030 and one in 2040. And the 2030 one, which is the closest one, is looking at excuse me, and a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions of 20% compared to the 2008 baseline. That's only 6 years out. That's quite close in time and is quite ambitious, to be honest. It may seem that the 2040 goal of a 70% reduction is much more ambitious, but given the tight deadline here, 2030, it is going to be a challenge for shipping to take the necessary actions in time because, of course, it takes time to deploy technologies, to develop those technologies, develop the fuels, roll everything out, and ensure a good uptake. Also, in 2030, the IMO agreed on another goal, which is probably equally important, and that is that 5% of the energy used by shipping should come from zero or near zero greenhouse gas technologies or fuels. That's, again, 5-6 years down the road. Shipping needs to have fundamentally changed the way it powers itself in a fairly significant part of the sector. So this is all going to be driving the regulatory development. And that brings me to the second point. Because, of course, a strategy is, in essence, a policy. It's a commitment by regulators and industry that we are going to go in that direction. But when it comes to the actual impact on ships, what is going to happen, then we're looking at what happens with existing regulations and what happens with new regulations. And of course, we have the existing regulations. We have the EDI, the EEXI, the CII, and all of these. And we are looking at the CII actually being reviewed and changed in 2025. But what I want to emphasize is that the IMO is also going to develop new regulations, in essence, 2 pieces of kit, and these are intended to enter into force in 2027. That probably means becoming effective in 2028. We shall see how that works out. But for things to come into force in 2027, you need to have an adoption, you need to have approval, you need to have some waiting periods because of the way the IMO works. And what that means in practical terms is that even if 2027 sounds far off, the IMO needs to make crucial decisions at MEPC 81 in March. And that is actually only a few weeks out. So there is a lot of negotiations and conversations that are going to be happening at MEPC 81 to hammer out at least conceptual design features of these new regulations. So that brings me to the next point there. What are these new regulations? 2 pieces of kit being brought to bear. One is a greenhouse gas intensity fuel standard. What that means is that there will be requirements agreed by the IMO that are going to be talking not just about how much fuel is being burned, but actually what is the footprint, what is the acceptable impact of the fuel that goes through shipping engines. Conceptually, it's kind of similar maybe to Fuel EU Maritime, at least in its intent. But what this regulation will do is to change, or at least attempt to change, the fuels that shipping actually burns. You will set a requirement, you will have an increasing stringency over time. At the end of the day, you will see the fuel mix in shipping changing because of this regulation. The second bit that is also going to come into play in parallel is some kind of carbon pricing. There, the solution space is a bit more blurry. We don't rightly know what the IMO will land on yet, but some form of cost associated with greenhouse gas emissions is also going to be coming out of the IMO, kicking in, i.e. entering into force at the same time as the intensity regulation, which means that we also need to have a conceptual agreement on that in March this year. So lots of things happening at the IMO. It's going to drive changes in the fuel mix. It's going to drive uptake of lower emission fuels, and it's going to have a significant impact going forward. Then we have more than just the IMO, obviously. We also have regional regulations around the world, and I want to highlight what is going on at the EU. The EU, in essence, have put two regulations into play here that are critical, or rather of critical importance for shipping. That is the ETS, the EU's emission trading system, an existing system where shipping has been rolled into it, and the Fuel EU Maritime, which is a system that will be coming into force in 2025, just a few months down the road there as well. Impact-wise, they are a little bit different, because what the ETS does is, in essence, impose a cost on shipping emissions. You will have to pay for your greenhouse gas emissions that are associated with port calls in Europe. There are lots of practical intricacies associated with this, how you set up the systems to turn in the company, the contractual implications and so on. And a lot of effort is being spent on that these days because it really is business critical. But it has entered into force, it is changing the industry, and it's a driver for energy efficiency technologies primarily. Also indirectly for lower carbon fuels, but since it's associated with cost of emissions, it incentivizes reducing those emissions. The second piece, the Fuel EU Maritime, coming into force in 2025, is a bit different. It, of course, is in many ways an inspiration for the greenhouse gas fuel intensity standard that the IMO is looking at, which is not surprising, seeing that the EU is making proposals at the IMO that build on what they've done in Europe. But what that does, again, is to put a requirement to what is burned in the engines. And that one is in a well-to-wake basis, whereas the ETS is on a tank-to-wake basis. And by setting requirements to what is burned in an engine, you are actually saying that we need to look at not necessarily how much you burn, but what you burn. So traditional energy efficiency measures, quite helpful for ETS, will not be equally helpful for the Fuel EU Maritime. But it will drive the uptake of alternative fuels. That is its intent, and the requirements are going to tighten starting in 2025 and becoming quite stringent towards 2050. And as a key point there, be aware that if you burn conventional fuels in 2025, you will be non-compliant from day one. So this is a regulation that actually also will matter immediately. Then, as a little bit of a spice on the end here, I also want to mention, as a kind of add-on cherry on top of the pudding, as it were, that it's not only the EU, it's not only the IMO. We have, for instance, the United Kingdom, which, in a kind of post-Brexit bonus gift to the industry, has agreed, at least conceptually in principle, that there will be a UK ETS also coming into force in 2026. Everything is not finalized there, neither date nor the design features, but it is on the table, and we do expect to see the final decisions by His Majesty's government quite soon. So when you wrap up all of this, what you have actually is that we have the ETS in 2024, we have Fuel EU Maritime in 2025, we have the UK ETS in 2026, we have the IMO regulations, the new ones, in 2027, 2028, along with a review of the CIR, for instance, in 2025, and I'm sure there will be other changes in this same time period that also will impact shipping. It's going to be a quite impactful decade, and the decisions being made when it comes to what kind of changes to business models, to technologies, to fuels, what kind of innovation is needed, what gets rolled out, it's all going to matter hugely. And that, of course, is what you will be discussing for the rest of the day. So with that, thank you very much for your attention, and I'll hand it back to Anne.
Thank you so much, Arik, for this comprehensive overview. As always, I must say, well done indeed. Now, keeping all these regulatory changes and everything that's on the agenda in mind, let's now dive a little bit into what it takes to navigate these complexities and to really take the right decisions. And there are some big questions that still need to be answered. So what then could a pathway towards net zero by 2050 look like? Will we actually be able to meet those targets? Will we have the fuels? Will we have the technologies? And also, what could alternative solutions look like? I'm not sure whether we're going to be able to answer all those questions, but we will certainly give it a try and dive a little bit into some insights and research from DNV. And for that session, I'm now very happy to hand over to our studio in Oslo, where we will be joined by two of our DNV colleagues, Eirik Øvrum, a principal consultant with DNV and also the lead author of our Maritime Forecast to 2050 report, will join us together with Tore Longva, our decarbonisation director in regulatory affairs. Gentlemen, over to you.
Thanks for the introduction from the studio. So the ambitions are set and the regulations are coming. So Eirik, do we have the fuels and technologies to decarbonize shipping?
Well, the industry is definitely working towards it. And the maritime industry seems to be in an age of innovation as it seeks to tackle climate change and the expectations from the rest of society. Many different technologies are being developed, both for use on board ship and for the production of carbon neutral fuels on land. We need to reduce energy consumption now, and in the end, carbon neutral fuels are needed to decarbonize fully. So Tore, what exactly do we need?
Thank you, Eirik. So let's have a look at what we need. So going back to 2008, which is the reference years for IMO's greenhouse gas ambitions. So in 2008, shipping emitted about 800 million tons of CO2 equivalents in a tank-to-wake perspective. So moving forward to 2022, according to our estimates, shipping have already reduced emissions by around 13%. And this is actually quite remarkable because during that period, the shipping activity, the seaborne trade, grew by 42%. So shipping improved its energy efficiency by 40%. And the amount of carbon neutral fuels in the fuel mix today is very small. Looking forward to 2030, so the IMO ambition is to reduce emissions by 20%, striving for 30%. But let's have a look at 20%. If you assume that the growth will continue from 2022 to 2030 by around 12%, then shipping needs to improve energy efficiency by another 15%, which is quite reasonable in our estimates. And that leaves around 6% of the energy needs to be supplied by carbon neutral fuels. So now I've talked about carbon neutral fuels. Let's explore that. What does that mean? So if you look at both the fuel production side and the onboard combustion, so without looking on fuels in a well-to-wake perspective, we risk that the emissions is shifted from the ship side. You could have zero emissions from the ship, but there you can have a lot of emissions on the fuel production side. So you need regulations, you need standards to ensure that emissions are not moved from ship to the shore. So on the right-hand side, we see another example where there is a limit on the fuel production side, and here you have actual reduction in a global perspective. So existing regulations like EU ETS and the upcoming Fuel EU Maritime, and also IMO in a separate circular on addressing biofuels, have implemented requirements on the fuel production side. The other term that we're going to hear a lot about is sustainable fuels. So what does sustainable entail? So EU's Renewable Energy Directive, used by EU ETS and FuelEU Maritime, CORSIA, aviation's CORSIA scheme, and also IMO through its LCA life cycle assessment guidelines that's under development, have put in place sustainability criteria. So example of these include well-to-wake emission below a certain threshold, usually fossil fuels, so for example 70% down. If you have a e-fuel produced from electrolysis, that electricity should be additional renewable electricity. If you have a biofuel, the biomass should not come from land with high carbon stock, and also the fuel producers should put in place operational practices related to water use, waste and chemicals. So how do you ensure that the fuel is sustainable and also adheres to the well-to-tank emission threshold? So looking at a fuel supply chain from extraction, cultivation, processing and refining, and transport distribution to the bunkering site and then onboard use. Fuel certification is for the extraction cultivation all the way up until the fuel bunkering. And each actor in that supply chain needs to keep an account and be audited on where do they get the feedstock, where do they get the biomass, where do they get the electricity. They need to calculate the emissions, and they get a proof of sustainability that's handed over to the next link in that supply chain. So this goes all the way up until the fuel bunkering, where the bunker supplier needs to accompany the mandatory bunker delivery note with a proof of sustainability or a similar documentation. So when a ship produces its emissions report, and for the verification they need to send in this documentation so that the verifier can ensure that the well-to-tank and also tank-to-wake emission is what they claim to be. So let's have a look at how much of these carbon neutral fuels are there out there. So we have done a mapping of more than 2,000 carbon neutral fuel projects. They are not only related to shipping, because a lot of the fuels that can be used for shipping also can be used for other purposes, such as ammonia, which can be used for fertilizer, and methanol, which can be used in the chemical industry. So we have looked at these projects, and we have identified at which stage they are, whether they are on the planning stage, they have taken the investment decision, or whether they are operational. So what we have done is that we have assigned a likelihood for all these projects being moved further. A lot of these projects were only on kind of ID stage almost. They have certainly not taken the investment decision, so not all of these projects will come to fruition. So we made an estimate, a high and a low estimate of how much of these carbon neutral fuels can be supplied. And this is for all sectors. So in our estimates, it ranges from 45 to 65 million tons of oil equivalents. So taking into account that shipping today uses 280 million tons oil equivalent, mostly fuel oil, a little bit of LNG. 6% of that, as you remember from our earlier slide, is the requirement for 2030 to achieve the ambitions, meaning that 30 to 40% of global supply of carbon neutral fuels need to be supplied to shipping. To put that in perspective, today's shipping share of global energy use is about 3%. Now, it's you also again need to take into account that a lot of the other industry, they can use other type of energy, they can use electricity. So it doesn't mean that the future share of carbon neutral fuels should be 3%, but still we need quite a substantial amount of carbon neutral fuels in 2030. So now, Erik, over to you. We heard a lot about fuels. So do we have the technologies on board a ship to use these fuels? And can you say a little bit about the other technologies that we could use for decarbonization of shipping?
Yeah, well, Tore, there are many technologies we need. And first, we need to reduce the energy consumption for seaborne transport in general. And then, in the end, we need to sail on carbon-neutral fuels. As you can see on this list, there are many technologies that can help us decarbonize shipping. Some of them are still being developed. Several of them will require demonstration of their performance in real operational conditions on board a vessel, while all of them will require commercialization to be able to become an off-the-shelf option for ship owners. For example, methanol, which works fine on ships today, still needs to commercialize the production of carbon-neutral methanol on land. And looking at this picture, I would say that the decarbonization of shipping is largely a technological question. And reducing energy we simulate the development of the world fleet, and in a simulation reaching zero carbon intensity by 2050, a third of the emission reduction comes from energy efficiency measures. So not only do we have to save energy anyway, but by moving forward and saving energy, we will also reduce emissions from shipping, but we will also reduce the burden on the rest of society, as other industries are also seeking to decarbonize using the same carbon-neutral energy. So we should start reducing energy consumption now and start building out the industry for producing carbon-neutral fuel as we go forward. One of the solutions for saving energy is going back to the future, using high-tech versions of the old sailing ships with one of the newly developed wind-assisted propulsion technologies. Wind already comes with regulatory incentives. For example, in the EEDI and EEXI design regulations, in the CII, in the Fuel EU and the EU ETS scheme, and also has an incentive in the Fuel EU Maritime. So what we see in the order book is that the strong goals and expected regulations have already had an impact on the fuel technology choices of the ship owners, with more than half the ships in the order book, measured by gross tonnage, can operate on alternative fuels. Now, it's crucial to realize that alternative fuel does not mean carbon-neutral fuel. An alternative fuel is simply a fuel that needs a different engine than a conventional ship. While burning any fuel can either be bad for the climate, for example, by using fossil fuels without carbon capture, or be carbon neutral using a properly sustainable biodiesel, for example. It has to follow these standards as you mentioned. It's very important. Made from sustainable biomass. So, combusting fuels containing carbon, such as fuel oil, LNG, LPG, and methanol, will produce CO2 that today is emitted to the atmosphere. And after reducing energy consumption, the solutions for reducing emissions fall into three categories. First, we can use fuels without carbon. We can produce fuels using sustainable carbon, or we can capture the CO2 from combustion. Biofuels, electrofuels, and blue fuels are all highly sought after by other industries. For example, biofuels in aviation, renewable electricity for the grid, and methanol, ammonia, and hydrogen for other industrial use. And using onboard carbon capture or nuclear propulsion, shipping can avoid the competition for sustainable biomass and renewable electricity. And we have performed a case study for a 15,000 TEU container vessel sailing between the Far East and Europe, trying to assess the technical and economical feasibility of using onboard carbon capture and nuclear propulsion. So carbon capture on land is a mature technology, while storage is being built out, and CCS on land is an integral part of the decarbonization plans of the US and the EU. And well, if you capture CO2 on a ship, you need to store it, so it requires space. Yet we find it's technically feasible for the case study ship, capturing 70% of the CO2 in 4,000 cubic meters of tanks and offloading 4 times per round trip. A crucial point, to compare the economics of these two solutions, we have compared it against the benchmark solutions of 4 different fuel technologies: a conventional ship, a dual fuel LNG ship, and a dual fuel methanol ship, and dual fuel ammonia, each of them blending in the appropriate amount of carbon neutral fuels to follow the emission regulations. With these 4 technologies, we also have 5 different price scenarios, giving us 20 lines of annual costs hidden within the gray band on the figure. We can see there's a big spread in what you can expect to pay for fuel and everything for a ship in the future. So we made 2 scenarios for onboard carbon capture. In the high cost scenario, we need to use 30% additional fuel to capture 70% of the CO2, and we have to pay $80 per ton of CO2 offloaded, transported away, and sequestered. In the low cost scenario, we have 15% fuel penalty and $40 per ton of CO2 in deposit cost. What we see from the case study is that onboard carbon capture can compete with the other proposed decarbonization solutions. And nuclear propulsion is already in use quite a lot, with 160 vessels, mostly naval, sailing the seas today with about 200 reactors on board. The nuclear industry is developing small modular reactors for use on land, primarily, and looking at the dimension and weights of some of these designs, we find that it's technically feasible to be used on our case study vessel. Of course, there are barriers to using nuclear power universally in merchant shipping, but industry actors are planning pilots for the early 30s. The cost of a reactor is quite high, so we assume a leasing cost, calculating the fixed annual cost based on an annuity loan of the capex over the lifetime of the ship at 8% interest. While the capex of the reactors are guessed at in our scenarios from looking at historical prices of land-based nuclear power. What we see is that nuclear power can compete with other decarbonization solutions if merchant ships are allowed to sail with nuclear power and they can reach this level of prices for the reactors on board. And they compete especially well in a net zero regulatory regime after 2050 in our simulation. And finally, our recommendations are that ship owners should reduce energy consumption now, consider all decarbonization options, focus on fuel flexibility, and consider long-term fuel strategy. And with that, Tore and I will hand over back to the studio.
Thank you very much indeed, Tore and Eirik. Very interesting presentation and some very clear recommendations there towards the end by Eirik, and I believe they are worth repeating. So it's really important for ship owners to reduce energy consumption now. It's important to put all the options, all the possible solutions on the table and really consider those. And of course, it's about staying fuel flexible and taking a long-term perspective when taking decisions now. Now, let's see how these recommendations resonate with some stakeholders from across the value chain. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my great pleasure to announce our upcoming panel discussion, and the conversation will be hosted by DNV's Business Development Director, Trond Hodne, and he has invited a number of stakeholders from across the industry to discuss different strategies, solutions, and not least also the commercial impact of decarbonisation in shipping. And the panel will feature a stellar lineup, including Altera Infrastructure, Berger Bulk, Njord Solutions, and Woodside Energy. And Trond, I'll leave it to you to do a proper round of introductions. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Anna. My name is Trond Hodne. I'm the Global Business Development Director in DNV Maritime. With us today, we have Ingvild Sæther, President and CEO of Altera Infrastructure. Altera has a fleet of FPSO, shuttle tankers, FSO, towing vessels, a unit for maintenance and safety, previously part of the TK group of companies. In addition to high focus on sustainability in the existing fleet, the company is investing significant resources into development of carbon capture and storage infrastructure. Then we have Paolo Tonon, Technical Director of Berger Bulk. Berger owns and manages a fleet of 80 fuel-efficient bulk carriers of various size. Next, we have with us Fredrik Pind, Managing Director, Njord Solutions, a company founded by Maersk Tankers, with ambitions to become a catalyst for technology adoption with the aim to improve fleet performance and cut emissions. And last but not least, Adrian McMillan, Head of New Energy Shipping in Woodside Energy. Woodside is a global energy company founded in Australia with a mission to provide the energy the world needs. Adrian is heading up Woodside shipping of new energy products, ammonia, liquid hydrogen, and CO2, as well as supply of lower carbon ammonia marine fuels. So then starting with you, Ingvild, Altera is investing into sustainable solution with the latest advanced e-shuttle tankers. Can you please tell us about the solutions you have adopted? What is driving you towards making such investments? And also, what are the advantages and challenges in being an early adopter?
Yeah, as global leaders, I think we have an obligation to lean forward and really be part of the solution and not wait for regulations to come. So already in 2015, we started on the green shipping program with the collaboration of a big group of industry players to develop the next generation of shuttle tankers where you have very specific trading patterns. So you are a lot on dynamic positioning, less on steaming, which means that you need batteries and you need different power configuration. So with that start point, we really started from scratch and saw what is the best possible technical solution we can develop for this type of propulsion and fuel and power generation. It has been a journey. We ordered those ships in 2017, which at that point was really a revolution rather than just an evolution of shuttle tankers. It's diesel, electric, LNG, MGO. It has batteries. It has VOC emissions that can be captured and blended into the fuel, and it reduces the emissions by approximately 40%. But it has been a journey since those ships were delivered, because adopting new technology is not always simple. It has been a challenge to get all the systems to work together. There has been COVID with lack of technicians to travel on board the vessels. It has been a journey for the crew on board to develop the competence to operate these vessels at the most in the most efficient way. And it has also been a challenge to find the right business model with the customers, where there is a difference between the investment in the capex and the operating cost of the lifetime of the vessel. So maybe I'll stop there.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ingvild. Decarbonization and investing into new technologies is surely not an easy thing to do. Then over to you, Paolo. I mean, Berger Bulk has a clear plan to decarbonize your fleet of the 80 bulk carriers.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, can you describe your plan and what's driving you to meet your targets, and maybe at the same time give us your view on what is really needed if we should speed up decarbonization?
Yes, thank you, Trond. Yeah, indeed, in Berger Bulk we have quite of an ambition program ahead of us. Few milestones that we like always to remember to ourselves. By 2025, becoming carbon neutral. By 2030, having the first zero carbon vessel in the water, and by 2050, having a full fleet of zero carbon vessels. And as you said, yes, we have roughly 80 vessels that we own and technically manage in-house, and vast majority large vessels, Capes and VLOCs, and vessels that have quite a long life cycle. We are not asset trader in the company. We keep vessels for the entire life. We have to achieve so, I think, and especially starting with the first milestones of 2025 carbon neutral, we have been one of the first ship owner and operator here offering our customers carbon neutral voyages. So the possibility to offset also through a series of highly recognized and certified programs to offset the emissions of the different voyages. And that will definitely be needed when the target is coming so close in time. But we have fundamentally 4 pillars that we use to achieve our targets. First and foremost important is to have an continuous attention to energy efficiency. Since 2008, in our fleet, we have improved the annual efficiency ratio by 46% in average in the fleet. And that comes obviously with newer tonnage, more modern, better design, more efficient engines, better design hulls and propellers. But also we have digitalized quite heavily our fleet with new tools to design the best voyages, new tools to look after the performances of each and every single energy consumer on board the vessels. So to spare each and every gram of fuel in being burned. The second part is definitely looking into energy efficiency technologies, and we have been the first to launch new Castelmax vessels this past summer with rigid wings. These are wings that will be able to cut easily 15% plus the fuel consumption of the vessel. The vessel is deployed on the trade between Brazil and China, so normally a trade where you can find a certain abundance of wind. But we are also testing and we are sailing with vessel with air lubrication. We have used a lot of shaft generators, and we will continue to retrofit those technologies because it makes very much sense and it reduce the overall emissions. Third pillar is definitely looking into alternative fuels. And we have been working with biofuels and testing successful in a number of vessels and having voyages with 100 grade of biofuels. We are looking very actively into into methanol, into ammonia as future fuels, and discussing with our customers and with our partners on the different strategies on how to implement these fuels that most likely will happen with new builds in the near future. And last but not least, we are definitively looking as a fourth pillar on carbon capturing. Because at the end of the day, the fleet we are having will be, yes, renewed from now till 2050, but we need to take care in the journey from now till 2050. And that cannot happen without capturing part of the emission that are related still to hydrocarbon fuels that we will continue to burn. And I think it's a complex portfolio of different activities, because at the end of the day, the bread and butter for Berge Balk is definitely to manage in a safe, in a reliable, and in a sustainable way the fleet of vessels and deliver the promises that we have given to our customers. So what we do to decarbonize comes very much on top. And you asked, what would we need to speed up the decarbonization? I think in a segment like dry bulk, the one we are working in Berge Balk, we are a bit more distance from the end customer. So the pressure is definitively not the same that the one we have seen in the container industry, for instance. I think there is still of work that needs to be done to align the different players. I think the cost for decarbonizing are immense, not only in capex, but definitively also in opex, when in the future you will burn the new fuels. And these costs cannot reside in one player only. So we need to have those business models that will allow to spread the investments throughout the entire chain.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Paolo. It's really impressive, I must say, what you have been done in Berge Balk, and you have done quite a lot on energy efficiency measures. That gives a nice transition to you, Fredrik, because investing into fuel efficiency measures, I believe, is already a strong business case, and it will be even stronger when we need to adopt to low and zero carbon fuels, which will have a higher cost of conventional fuels naturally. So from your view then, if we have a forceful implementation of energy efficiency measures in the world fleet, everything that is known, how far do you believe that will take us with the need to, or before we need to go to low or zero carbon fuels? And also, what are the main technologies that you see that can really make a big difference?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Trond, and thanks for the lineup, Paolo. Very impressive to hear what you have been up to in Berge Balk. So first of all, I mean, it is these initiatives and these learnings from companies like Berge Balk that we also have had in Maersk Tankers and the wider Maersk that we've taken into Njord to propel and to be the catalyst for other owners to do similar things, because this is what really matters, and this is what can move the needle both now, but also will enable decarbonization long term and enable the adoption of these new green fuels. Forceful implementation, I hope that won't be the case. I mean, I hope there are also some good incentivizing to be done for the owners, so we'll see a natural implementation. And the interesting thing is actually, we've seen a quite interesting trend from 22 to 23 and now stepping into 24. In 22, there was a lot of talk about the new green fuels and the vessels to carry those, but also recognizing that it will take a long time. Whereas 2023, we've seen the wider conversation in the industry focusing a lot on energy efficiency technologies, stating that this is the thing to do both here and now, but also the enabler long term. And then when we move into 2024, I think we will actually see that this will be the year of significant action when it comes to energy efficiency technologies. We have a number of moving parts, both direct and indirect commercial incentives. We have the first true CII reporting happening based on the 2023 numbers. We have the true or first example of a carbon taxation for the EU ETS. And then we have good examples of, for instance, the right ship rating suddenly dropping the EPL as a way to improve your greenhouse gas rating. So suddenly you have to look for other measures. And those are some of the elements that will push the industry to adopt more technologies. Now, from Njord's perspective, and one of the reasons why we founded Njord was that we could actually see that there's a big gap between what can actually be done with different technologies and what is being done. There are more than different 40 elements of technologies that you can apply, but the industry has not really embraced the full scale yet. So when we look at the different technologies, even the basic stuff now, we heard Paolo talk about air lubrication, wind technology, even carbon capture, but there are actually a significant number of low-hanging fruits, basic technologies, well proven, that if you combine them in the right constellation, they can actually deliver in a combination more savings than traditional we've seen with some of the wind technologies for air lubrications. And this is what we push for as the very first thing. So on average, 9 to 10 technologies on the vessels we worked with so far is what we find relevant, and that has brought somewhere around 10 to 12% savings on the vessels that we worked on across the main segments in shipping. If you then add some of the more novel stuff that Paolo is referring to, we've seen examples both of wind and air lubrication in combination with each other and the basic technologies. Then we're pushing beyond 20% savings and even pushing close to 30. And so that's quite significant and really a big impact we can make. And to answer your last part of the question, so which technology is it then that will win the race? The simple question is there's no one technology that will stand alone and win the race. It will be a combination of the many. So it is figuring out for your fleet with the different vessels and the different technologies available, what is the right combination of technologies vessel by vessel for the different trading routes, again mentioning that wind is not applicable everywhere in the world, and figuring out what is the right combination. That will allow you to increase the savings and it will also allow you to improve the return on investment. Some of the more novel stuff out there today has a high return on investment that's difficult for the owner to get funding for or for a charter to pay for. But if you combine it with some of the low-hanging fruits, which has a short return on investment, then the average return on investment can be quite attractive, and suddenly the business case is quite positive, especially if you add on the upside of CI ratings and the EU ETS. So to answer your question, we can see quite some high savings potentials, and the right technology or the winning technology will be the combination of many.
Thank you very much, Frederick, for those insights. And over to you, Adrian. So energy efficiency, I guess we can see as an enabler for eventually adopt over to low and zero carbon fuels. And eventually we will have to, if we are going to decarbonize shipping completely. So what do you see as the roadmap to commercialization, adoption, and reliable availability of these fuels at the scale needed?
Yeah, thanks, Trond. As I think, as my colleagues here today have outlined, there's a number of parameters that we need to work and collaborate with multiple parties across the supply chain here. So there's many global industry efforts underway looking at how do we get these technical, commercial, and regulatory elements all combined together, particularly on the Green Corridor efforts. So Woodside, we're a participant in the Getting to Zero Coalition Iron Ore Task Force, as well as Silk Alliance and the Centre for Zero Carbon Shipping activities there. And those are really good vehicles and good technical and regulatory progress is being made there, but the challenge then becomes the affordability of these transitions, and that's what we're tackling today. And efficiency is absolutely vital for this. These will be more expensive fuels in the future, and how do we minimize that cost burden? And that comes through efficiency there. So it's fantastic to see also good progress with dual fuel vessels being ordered, as illustrated on the DNV AFI dashboard. Unfortunately, those dual fuel vessels doesn't necessarily translate into a demand volume. So as a future fuel producer and ammonia in this case, is the demand signals, there's lots of interest, but they're not firm demand signals. And Woodside, we've committed back in 2021 to spend up to $5 billion in investment of these new lower carbon energy services by 2030. But how do we push forward with those investments? We're making really good progress there, but we're stuck in this loop at the moment where we've got this potential future demand for, say, ammonia or liquid hydrogen. But to make those decisions, we really need to get clarity of the where, when, how much, how frequently, and what is the carbon intensity of that delivered product. Even a theoretical zero carbon intensity produced product needs to be shipped. And when it's put on a ship, it requires a carbon intensity. So how do we work with all of the parties to understand the full well to tank requirements and then reflect that into our production there? And with that sort of burden on the industry with the increased fuel costs, then we need those market-based mechanisms to really help level the playing field, because everyone needs to remain competitive within that landscape. And there needs to be some of that funding from the market-based mechanism to support and enable those across the supply chain to allow these transitions to occur, because we need to move to these lower carbon fuels in the future there. So working with our customers is really important here, and all of the participants across the supply chain, understanding, answering those questions of the where, when, how much, how frequently, and carbon intensity there.
Thank you, Adrian. I think you touched upon this a bit already about the affordability. What would be the cost? How affordable will these fuels be? And also during the transition, how do you foresee that we will close the price gap towards conventional fuels?
Yeah, that's a really tricky question. I think that's what everyone is trying to tackle across the industry there. It's no small measures here, and it's going to take various factors. I think, as Paolo mentioned before, how do we share the risks across the supply chain? How do we understand those risks across the supply chain? And then the various returns across those investment decisions there, and how do we balance that out? Moving from a spot market procurement type process to a longer term commitment. And those longer term commitments, at least in the near term, and I'm talking, say, 2030 type timeframe, is going to be required for the investment decisions to be made. By 2050, hopefully we're back into a spot market. There's large volumes of these future fuels available. But in order to tackle this 2030 question, then that competitive gap is the fuel costs. And I'm talking about any of these, whether it's a biofuel, a methanol, ammonia, or a liquid hydrogen, they're going to probably be of the order of 3 to 5 times the fuel costs. And so finance can help, risk sharing can help, terms of duration of contracts can all help, but they're all small factors. It really comes down to that market-based mechanism. And the European Union, of course, are making strong progress in that space, and that is driving demand and expectations. But we need a global policy here to really have clarity on the life cycle analysis requirements, the expectations, and how then a global shipping industry can work within that space. So I think that's for me, is how does the industry move forward collectively rather than having broken policies across the various world, which then puts the burden back onto the ship owner as they're trying to navigate these waters.
Thanks, Adrian. Then we have the question on the blue and the green fuels. Do you see a difference in interest in the market for the green and the blue? Or is it just carbon intensity that will matter? And also, do you believe there will be a big price difference in the market for these two type of fuels?
Yeah, that's an excellent question there, Trond. Thank you for that. If I reflect back 12 months ago, the conversation was very much about green, 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 but many of the parties not truly understanding what that meant. But we've seen quite a transition over the last 12 months where not just the shipping industry, but also power generation and other customers are now talking about the carbon intensity with credible numbers that people can work towards. Largely because a gas-based, at Woodside, we try to stay away from the colours because colours aren't particularly helpful. Easy to use as a term, but it doesn't necessarily give you the clarity of the carbon intensity of those future fuel products there. So we work on that parameter, but then if you look at a gas-based with CCS solution, blue in the old vernacular, that's significantly cheaper than a renewable-based solution, particularly when we've got a 2030 focus here. It's very easy to look at learning cost curves and look at that 2050 solution, and the world needs to move to that renewable-based solution by 2050. But how do we get a cost-effective transition? So coming back to that increased fuel cost, we need to do whatever we can to meet the lower carbon intensity from well to tank requirements with the minimum cost as possible. And at this stage, we see a lot of interest in our gas-based plus CCS options compared to our 100% renewable options. We can offer both to the market, but we certainly see that strong interest in the lower carbon options with the gas-based and CCS solutions there. Again, it requires that conversation with the customers. The customers here are wide. It includes the ship owner or the cargo owner, the OEMs, and downstream from those, because ultimately those costs need to be passed through that full value chain, and as well as the understanding of what is actually being procured and used as a fuel there. It's not a simple conversation, but it requires that close collaboration with all of those stakeholders on that supply chain.
Yeah, thank you very much, Adrian. And that concludes our debate. So thank you all for participating and sharing your insights. So then back to you, Anna, in studio.
Thank you very much, Trond, and thank you, of course, to all the panelists for sharing your views and strategies. And I mean, there's so much to be considered and so many considerations and implications to be taken into account. So it's really not easy to take the right decisions these days, but there may be more than one way to skin a cat. But if anything, what I learned today is that there doesn't seem to be a way around implementing energy efficiency measures and strategies. And one option that has been mentioned a couple of times with certainly interesting potential is wind-assisted propulsion. And coming back to what Knut said in his opening remarks, when he reflected, who would have thought that after all these decades of technological advancements, we would go back to sailing again? Well, if anything, I believe our next expert probably never had a doubt about that. Let's learn more about the available technologies for wind-assisted propulsion and also the energy-saving potential of such technology. A warm welcome now to one of DNV's top experts on the topic from our Hydrodynamics and Stability Department. Over to Johanna Tranell.
Okay, thank you so much, Anne, for that introduction. And you're right, I'm very excited to see that we are going sailing again, because this is certainly a very exciting solution to decarbonizing our industry. I'm happy to spend the next 10 minutes talking about it, wind-assisted propulsion systems, which we usually simply shorten to WAPS. And it basically means that we put sails on modern commercial ships to use wind for propulsion. Now, using wind for propulsion is obviously not a new thing. Ships with the traditional rigs like this one has been transporting goods across the oceans for centuries. But it's not like this anymore. And although the more modern systems were initiated relatively long ago with, for instance, the invention of the Flettner rotor, like you see here, in the 1920s, low fuel prices didn't really give much incentive at the time to explore the technology. But today, our focus has changed. We must reduce the emissions from our industry. And so moving from the traditional rig, we see vessels looking like this today. Now, there are different solutions being offered commercially or under development, like you can see in this drawing, and they're categorized under different groups. So all of these have different aerodynamic properties that makes them suitable for different vessel types. I'll quickly go through most of them. So let's start with the most mature solution in terms of installations today, and that's the Flettner rotor on the left-hand side, also called rotor sail. So a Flettner rotor is a cylindrical structure that rotates around its own axis, and in wind that creates a low and high pressure area, which generates lift and drag forces, and these are the forces that are perpendicular and parallel to the wind direction. Now, the rotor generates a relatively large amount of lift, but also drag, and we say that it has a lower aerodynamic efficiency. So that means that they're probably more suitable for slower vessels, and the types that we see today, for several reasons though, but still, that's typically bulk carriers, tankers, and ro-ros. And for practical reasons, the sails can be lowered, like you see on the left-hand side, and that's a feature that most sail systems today offer. So moving to the rigid wing sails, these are utilizing the typical foil structure to create thrust, which is basically like an airplane wing mounted vertically on the deck. There are different solutions currently being offered or under development, and you see some examples here in the photos, but on a general level, they're all made of hard shells. And they're equipped with high lift devices, such as flaps that you see on these images, which generates more lift. And the aerodynamic efficiency of wing sails is relatively large, which probably makes them more suitable for faster vessels. And similar to the rigid wing sails, I wanted to show you an example of a soft or hybrid wing sail, meaning that the sail is made of modern textile material instead of the hard shell. Now, this generally gives a low-weight sail system, good for instance, stability reasons, and the sail can be reefed and furled to the deck. There are solutions like this one with just one section, but we also see solutions with a main section and flaps. Now, the last technology that I wanted to quickly go through is the suction sail. It's also called ventilated foil or turbo sail. And at a first glimpse, it might look like a Flettner rotor, but the suction sail doesn't rotate. It's an oval-shaped vertical structure, and it's got a movable flap downstream of the sail and an electric-powered air suction system. Now, the suction delays flow separation in the air, which increases the generated lift, and hence the suction sail provides a large lift per force area. Okay, so that's the sail systems that are being offered today commercially that I wanted to mention. So this is happening now, and let's have a look at the current uptake. According to Clarkson's research, there are currently 37 vessels in the fleet with WOPs installed today, and 52 in the order bank. And you can see from this diagram that there is a difference in the uptake depending on the sail system, but I think that the key takeaway that I want you to take away from this is just that we do see a strong uptake today, and stakeholders do invest and do believe in this technology, which we also heard about earlier today. So how much do the sail systems save today though? Vessels which have operated with WOPs for time now show yearly fuel savings of around 5 to 10% according to the owners and the operators. But this is a technology under development, and several stakeholders claim savings up to 25% for retrofits and even high for new builds. But I also think it's important to mention that there's ongoing research in this technology for increasing those savings even more. Okay, But the savings that you can make are dependent on a lot more factors than just a sail, and I think that's important to keep in mind. I did mention a few sail features earlier that makes different sail system relevant for different vessel types, but there is of course a lot more to it. Some ship types are better suited for WOPs than others, and some sail technologies are better than others for certain ship types. So let's spend the last minutes talking about some things to consider if this is something that you'd like to explore for your vessel, whether it's a retrofit or a new build. So let's say that this is your vessel and you are considering a WOPs installation. As a high-level basic first assessment, there are three things that you can consider. First of all, assess the wind conditions on your route. What wind speed and wind angle does the vessel experience on the route? Because different sail systems work best at different wind angles, so the generated sail force is highly dependent on these two factors. Then simulations of past voyages over some years using hindcast weather data with a number of departures throughout the year can help you understand the potential of the sail system on your operating vessel. Now, in a real case, weather routing may increase the gain, and it's also important to be aware of the impact on the logistics and trade due to the weather variability and ship speed. Okay, secondly, since the sails require power to be operated, it's also relevant to consider the onboard electrical power system, especially if the case is retrofit. Because the generation of the auxiliary power may affect the net fuel savings of the WOPs. And then thirdly, of course, the practical considerations of the general arrangement is important, such as the deck space, but also lightweight and stability of the vessel. For a new build vessel, this is, of course, part of the ship design process. Okay, so that's a good start when assessing whether WOPs is suitable for your vessel. But there's, of course, also other considerations further down the road that I'd like to mention. We can't cover them all, but just to mention a few different aspects. A hazard identification study is highly recommended when launching a WOPs installation for risk management. And for retrofits, the structural integrity is important to assess. Maybe reinforcements are needed. And then, of course, regulatory requirements come into place, such as navigational light and line of sight when we place a large WOPs unit on the deck. And finally, I'd just like to end with the importance of verifying the performance of the WOPs during operation. I think you'll hear a discussion on that later, the importance of performance verification. But I'd just like to say that with respect to WOPs, the phase that the industry is currently in, it's important to understand how these systems perform and do it in a transparent way in order to build further trust in the technology and increase the uptake even more. Because we all want to continue building the momentum for this technology. Okay, that's all I wanted to say today, and thank you for listening in. I hope it's given you a better overview of the possibilities and a better understanding of this exciting technology. So thank you, and back to you, Anna.
Thank you so much, Johanna. What a nice, short, sweet, and very insightful presentation. Now, wind-assisted propulsion is just one option, one technology to drive energy efficiency, and quite a few other options have been mentioned by presenters and speakers earlier today. Well, the consensus certainly has been that energy efficiency will be absolutely crucial short term. But there are a few open questions yet to be answered. How, for example, to ensure the effectiveness of such energy-saving measures and technologies? How to prove that it actually works? How to measure their performance, and also how to incentivize the uptake? Let's see whether we will get some answers to these questions in our upcoming session, which will be hosted by my colleague Hans Anton Tvete, and he has an interview partner. It's Christian Bonfils of Copenhagen Commercial Platform. Gentlemen, over to you.
Thank you so much for that very kind introduction, Anne. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are calling in from in the world, and welcome to this session. My name is Hans Anton Tvete. I'm Business Development Manager within Energy Efficiency here in DNV. And today I'm very pleased to have with me CEO of Copenhagen Commercial Platform, Mr. Christian Bonfils. Welcome, Christian.
Thank you, Hans Anton. Thank you for inviting me to the summit.
My pleasure. So we just heard from my colleague Johanna speaking about wind-assisted propulsion systems. Very interesting presentation there. And I would just like to follow up a bit on that, continue our talk on energy efficiency and how we can help the industry accelerate the uptake even further. Because it's really is important now to get to grips with energy efficiency, because it can have such a fundamental impact on the maritime industry going forward. Our maritime forecast last year forecasted that 1/3 of decarbonization in maritime in 2050 will be taken by energy efficiency measures. So that says something about the importance going forward. And the business case for energy efficiency devices are now also starting to look really good, with the new fuels becoming scarce in availability, becoming costly. And on top of that, you have the EU ETS, which came into force this year. So business case for energy efficiency devices, that will start to look really good. And you will see scrutiny also from consumers. It's expected from ship owners to really decarbonize, to make use of technology, drive down and improve Scope 3 emissions for the shipping industry. Johanna talked about wind-assisted propulsion. You have other important energy efficiency devices as well that can really make a difference here, and many of them are already making an impact. But you know, some of these have a little longer investment horizon, like wind-assisted propulsion. How can we make sure that these more novel technologies reach out to the wider maritime community, think, Christian? And how can we accelerate the uptake?
I think first of all, it's very important that we create some incentive, and I think that nowadays we have lots of very accurate data available, so we can start by changing the contracts. The contracts are not formed to incentivize anyone, but if we add in accurate data into the contract will be transformed more to a collaboration between the charters and the owner. We need transparency in these data, so whatever the charter and owner sees, the captain sees, and then we need a validation of this data on top of that. I think that's a very important start, and then thereafter, owners and charters are in a collaboration where they are mutually incentivized to install energy-saving devices. I think we have seen energy-saving devices and the improvement in hulls over the last 20 years, but now we see a whole new range of much more expensive energy-saving devices, and in order to install them, they need to be in incentive, and we need to measure how they really perform and what our exactly upside are.
Thank you for those insights. Totally agree that making it practical, making it commercial is something that will drive it. One thing I would like to then add to that is also creating the trust needed to make these collaborative commercial frameworks, what can we say, transactional. You have all that you need in the good data. So building in good data, then making sure that that data has a high quality, it's accurate, it's trustworthy, you have it at the right frequency, you are able to have an open and transparent method as well to quantify the effect. That's really important. And get it verified, get it someone else also to come in, take a look at it. I think something that really will bring trust into the collaborative framework and really accelerate the uptake of technology.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, and especially on, I mean, we need to measure and we need to validate. But when we know the true value of the energy saving devices, it's very natural to build them into the contract. And I think that as an industry, we have in the past adapted to whatever regulatory changes there have been. I think when it comes to decarbonization, we need to change the industry. We need to change the way we conduct the business, and I think contract is a very interesting and a low hanging fruit to look at. But we need transparency and validation of these data.
These contracts of which you speak, some of them are older than the diesel engine, and the industry is vested into current practices. Where should we start to really make that transition into this more collaborative frameworks, you think?
I think in terms of the contract, as I said, I mean, they are not built to decarbonize, but there's an interest to change. There's an interest from both charters and owners to improve. And I think that we are at a stage right now where the market have reach a certain maturity. So we want to look at how can we stress our focus on decarbonization. So it comes much more natural now than it did a year ago. And then by applying data into the contracts, I mean, today's contracts are built with lots of tolerances. The owners are hiding behind the warranties because he have never had any incentive to perform better. But with a modern contract, owners are incentivized to perform better. The charters will pay for exactly what they get, and I think all that is fueled by accurate data. I mean, data is not only a technical thing. I mean, data need to be used commercially, and I think it's very interesting where we are now, where we can implement these data sets into our commercial contracts, into bank loans, into validation of energy saving devices.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that. You mentioned bank loans. How do you see financing evolving? Where's the banks and the lenders into all of this?
We see banks starting with incentivizing with margins towards efficiency of the ship. The more efficient, the lower margin. But in order to do so, I mean, if you then as an owner install an energy saving device to improve, you need to measure it, and you need to have that data set validated. In the past, we haven't had the data so we could measure it. I mean, it was more theory. Now that is practical. So by implementing that data, the bank will be able to get a measure and a validated proof that whatever energy saving device you have put on, that this is the effect after a certain period. And I think we need that. We need that proof of concept. We need to validate whatever installation we do, and thereby, if you then get lower margin, you are incentivized. But it all comes down to data, in my mind.
Thank you so much, Christian. Quick attempt from my side to wrap up a little bit. Energy efficiency is going to be critical. The business case is going to be critical. But you need the data, accurate, transparent, relevant, high quality and verified data to quantify the effect of it. And when you have that in place, you could enter into collaborative frameworks and new contracts and new ways to do business that could enable a win-win situations with multiple stakeholders in the maritime industry going forward. Thank you so much, Christian, for joining me today. It was really a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, Anne, then I give the word back to you on the main stage. Thank you.
energy efficiency will be critical, but we need to be able to prove the effectiveness, and there it all comes down to data. Really important insights there shared by Hans Anton and Christian. Thank you so much to the two of you. And by the way, Hans Anton will be back in one of our breakout sessions happening after the program on the main stage. I mentioned it before, there will be 4 breakout sessions where you can dive into a number of topics, and Hans Anton will actually stay on the topic of providing transparency and trust in a ship's performance with, for example, DNV's Vessel Technical Index. So one important, interesting session that you can join a little later on. But before we go there, we have one more important topic that we really would like to address. I mean, we've covered a lot of ground already. We've talked about market drivers. We've talked about latest regulations, implications and impact on the industry. We've discussed different decarbonisation strategies. We've also looked into certain technological options. And of course, we just touched upon the need for trusted and verified data. So we've come a long way. And we have spent time on why decarbonisation is necessary and what needs to be done to decarbonise. And next we would like to talk a little bit about the how, because only if done safely, decarbonisation can be achieved. And there, of course, the role of the seafarers is absolutely crucial. But are the seafarers out at sea ready for the transformation? This is a question we would now like to address in a short interview hosted by my colleague Cristina Sayens de Santa Maria, who is our regional manager, Southeast Asia, Pacific and India. Cristina, please.
Thank you, Anne, for the introduction, and hello, everyone. As the challenges and opportunities of decarbonization become clearer, it is vital for us to make sure that the seafarers have the necessary competencies in terms of new fuels and technology in order for them to safely and efficiently operate ships. As the industry is already grappling with talent shortage, it is even more important for us to be able to attract and retain talent through listening through the voices of the seafarers. And having that in mind, I am very happy to have with us today Stephen Jones from the Mission to Seafarers and founder of the Seafarers Happiness Index. Stephen has a lot of experience, has been a decade sailing as navigation officer, and afterwards went ashore working in several shipping companies, insurers, publishers, government bodies, and you name it all, to bring maritime solutions to the industry, which is what we need, and obviously one of them, the Seafarers Happiness Index. So welcome, Stephen.
Thank you very much. Great to be with you.
Perfect. So Stephen, we did a survey recently together with the Singapore Maritime Foundation on seafarers, and the majority of them felt that they needed quite a lot of training related to new fuels and new technologies. Now, through your work with the mission, how is the sentiment, amongst seafarers in the digital transformation? How do they see their role on it? Are they worried? Are they concerned? Or how do they feel?
Yeah. So from the Seafarers Happiness Index, we asked 10 standard questions to global seafarers to gauge their sentiment. And one of the issues that we look at is training, workload, how they're feeling about the general situation with life at sea. And the issue of readiness comes across a lot. We're hearing from a lot of seafarers talking about how they are concerned. They feel maybe not part of the transition to future fuels as they should. Hearing from a lot of certainly engineers who believe maybe that their voices aren't being heard or their experiences, their insights aren't being translated up the kind of chain into companies and into the wider industry as well. So there's certainly a growing concern from that perspective. Also, there are issues about safety. There are issues about what new fuels will be used, how they will be applied to different vessels, different trades, etc. So I do think that engaging seafarers more naturally in this debate is hugely important. Another part of the issue relates to the workload. So digitalization very much to the fore, and there's been some hugely important, significant and positive steps in the industry. But all too often we do hear from seafarers that don't feel that the digitalization is maybe helping their workload. We still hear of burdens of administration and paperwork, whatever paperwork is deemed to mean by seafarers, but they keep saying and coming back to that there's still that burden on them. So there's a lot still to be done to make the future as we see it of new fuels, of the tools on board to make the workflow better. There is still a lot of work to be done.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Going a bit deeper into that happiness index, could you tell us a bit more about it and what you wanted to achieve with it?
Yeah, it's been a long time that we've been asking seafarers how they feel, so that's great in itself. The Seafarers Happiness Index started about 10 years ago as part of a social network for seafarers. Latterly, in the past 5 or 6 years, it's come under the Mission to Seafarers as a project, working with them. So I run the Happiness Index for the mission, and the support that they give and how it plugs into the tools that they provide to seafarers is hugely significant and important. So not only the support in centres going on to vessels, but also having the digital revolution translated into the way that we talk and listen to seafarers. So that's really how it fits for the mission. The mechanism itself of the Happiness Index is really about asking questions. How do you feel about life? And it feels maybe quite simple to think of it in those terms, but in essence, asking people how they feel and then finding out if they're happy or not is a really important fundamental part of life. It's a pillar of all our relationships. And so we use the 10 standard questions that we ask seafarers, and we ask them to gauge how they feel about almost every aspect, really, of being at sea: their general happiness, their connectivity, shore leave, food and drink on board, whether they have access to exercise and entertainment, their interactions on board, their relationships, workload, finances, whether they feel adequately rewarded, and also the welfare that they're able to tap into. And across them that we mark out of 10, we get the kind of wider average happiness index that we kind of publish to the industry, but also it gives us the mechanism to see and gauge how seafarers are feeling. Allied to the data, probably, and to my mind, the most important part of this is that we actually capture what seafarers tell us as well. They write and they tell us and explain. So it's not just data, it's not just numbers, it's also them explaining the challenges that they face and why it makes them feel the way it does, and that hopefully allows us to bring these things together in a compelling narrative that makes a difference.
So any key findings from that very short?
Yeah, there's constant new findings coming out all the time. Unfortunately, in 2023, we had quite a continued drop across all quarters in the general sentiment, and there were lots of different issues that came to the fore in that, issues surrounding particularly how they feel treated by those ashore, a sense of sometimes a little bit of a lack of respect from those ashore, whether it's as they try to enter a port and are denied shore leave, whether it's sometimes management in the offices ashore. And I think increasingly, as fewer people working in offices have been to sea, sometimes we do see there's a little bit of a difficult dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Certainly an area to try to improve on. But I mean, we have a big audience, so getting into the solution mode, what can we do today in the short term and more in the longer term in order to help the seafarers, in order to attract and retain that talent?
I think with anything, it's a willingness to not only listen, to see what the situation is, to then try and understand it and spot your own solutions for every company, for every trade, for every port, for every kind of unique situation. There are changes that can be made that will make things better. I think that kind of relationship between the ship and shore seems pivotal at the moment. So making sure that companies do have the empathy, the ability and the willingness to support seafarers, to make the changes. So whether it is listening to them say that the feeding rate is too low, they want more and better quality food, whether it's being denied shore leave in certain places, whether it's the support and resources on board for workload. Increasingly towards the end of the last quarter of the reports we had, the security situation in the Red Sea was just starting to deteriorate. But what that meant was a spike in workload as ships were trying to prepare better for security, but they didn't have extra people on board or the resources to do so. So all of a sudden, the workload would spike. Watchkeeping was kind of intensifying the preparation, but again, with no resources built in to deal with that. So it's understanding the very movable reality that seafarers are constantly faced with. And again, coming back, and I think the most pivotal to all of this is the matter of respect. If we respect seafarers, if we understand the challenges and we want to make the changes necessary, then we will do so. If we want to sideline, if we want to ignore and overlook, then we won't. And I think there's a decision point to be made sometimes.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Stephen. Unfortunately, we cannot speak more today about this, but thank you for the tips, and hopefully every one of us can contribute to improve that happiness index.
A pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Christine and Stephen for this very inspiring session. And ladies and gentlemen, there are so many tough decisions that need to be taken amidst this big transformation. And I quite liked what Stephen just said when pointing out that it's also about taking conscious decisions for seafarers when managing the energy transition. And all of you can still take a very conscious decision to support the mission to seafarers by making a small contribution, making a small donation, using the QR code on the screen. As I said it before, DNV will happily match all donations coming in today. So thank you again to all of you for showing your support. Now, this almost brings us to the end of today's event. And Jason, I hope you enjoyed the show, and maybe you can help us wrap up a little what we've heard today and share your key takeaways.
Yeah, definitely. It was a very interesting day. I think many things to take home. I would start by saying that no one can do it alone. We all need to cooperate and to have stakeholders from all the value chain. A lot of wind. We heard wind-assisted propulsion being mentioned in many sessions. And I took one thing from the panel that it was good to once again solidify the fact that no golden solution exists for everything. We need to do the investigation for all segments and sub-segments to see what can we take benefit from. And definitely, we talk about technology, but we must never forget the fact that this technology will go on board, and on board people will need to operate this technology. So I think it is imperative that today we already start to put a lot of focus on the seafarers and their safety. And if I picked a main takeaway, it would be that, of course, we continue to discuss about fuels, and especially for the new buildings, but it is imperative to start becoming more serious on energy efficiency. We need to investigate every option, every solution, reap the low-hanging fruits, and improve in practice today.
Perfect summary. Thank you so much, Jason.
Thank you, and thank you for a wonderful moderation, as always.
That's very kind indeed. Thank you, Jason. Thank you for joining me in the studio. I'm sure it's not the last time that we get to see you at a DNV event, and take care. Thank you also to all the other speakers who have contributed and joined the discussions throughout the day. I must say it's been really, really insightful.